On your behalf, I would like to welcome Mr. Nandkumar Saravade and would like to thank him for accepting our invite to be with us and discuss on a very critical aspect, that is cyber risk. We all are subject, we all are not subject to only, we all are exposed to this risk on and off, directly and indirectly, not just on our systems or the devices which we use, but also through various agencies who have captured our data, information, and security is at risk oftentimes for n number of reasons. I'm sure the interaction is going to help us understanding that and how we can mitigate it, how we can ring fence it. If I briefly introduce, sir has a illustrious profile to his career and number of key contributions to the nation. Sir is a senior advisor on governance strategy, ethics, and cyber security, drawing from his impactful stints with the government and also with the private sector close to 4 decades. He has expertise across diverse domains of law enforcement, banking, cybersecurity, technology management, and so on and so forth. Sir had been the founding CEO of REBIT, that is Reserve Bank Information Technology Limited, which was set up in 2016 as a fully owned subsidiary of Reserve Bank of India on technology management and cyber security for the systems of RBI as well as Indian banking sector. Sir had also been a CEO of Data Security Council of India, a think tank which specializes in cybersecurity, industry development, policy research, advocacy. Sir has also advised a number of institutions such as Ernst & Young, ICICI Bank, and the list is long on various aspects of fraud risk management, and has worked with best-in-class institutions like Citibank India, Central Bureau of Investigation, and so on and so forth. Sir had been 1987 batch of Indian Police Services officer and has been posted with Jammu and Kashmir in West Bengal. He has also served, as I told, Central Bureau of Investigation on deputation and has worked in Mumbai and Jaipur for about 7 years. When he was looking after enforcement of the Prevention of Corruption Act, investigation of bank frauds and economic offences. Sir has been awarded with the Prime Minister's baton and revolver for being the best all-rounder professional in 1987 batch of IPS, and also the Indian Police Medal for his distinguished services. Sir has a BTech to his credit, as well as a master's degree in technology from Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. I would like to welcome you, sir, again, and thank you for accepting our invite. Today, we are going to have your discourse on cyber risk and what role the board and the directors have. Over to you, sir, for your discourse, please. You need to unmute, sir.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dr. Gupta, for the kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here among this distinguished audience and share some thoughts on cyber risk, which, as Dr. Gupta mentioned, to which we are all exposed. And increasingly, all organizations are forced to think about this risk, and it is very useful to get some understanding of what is the magnitude, what are the trends, what is the right approach to deal with this, and how we can enable a resilient economy by working with our wherever we are working as decision makers to help the teams to cope with this particular problem. I have a few slides. Those are meant basically to guide the flow of the discussion. And I hope in the end we'll have some time left for question and answer. So some of the concepts are a little technical, but I feel beginning with cyber itself, everything is going to be technical. So let me start the slides, and if there are any questions, kindly feel free to put in the chat box, and we can take them up later once the slides are over. So if you indulge me for a second, I will just open the. I hope my screen is visible.
Yeah, it's visible, sir. You can make it full screen. Yeah. Yeah, it's visible. It's visible.
Okay, right. So I wanted to start with a short story because it kind of illustrates the kind of issues which are there in the cyber world. So we all heard of impersonation frauds. I mean, we constantly hear about stories of somebody posing as somebody else. And unfortunately, in the cyberspace, that becomes so much more easier. But it can have grave implications for a company. And this is one instance where there was a large hit to the company. I don't know whether the company is surviving or not, but it really went through a big hit because of this particular thing. Now, this is a case, and all the information in this slide deck is in public domain. So there's nothing very proprietary that I have drawn upon. Is there, FIRs are there out there. These have been reported cases in newspapers and so on. So this is in Mumbai, case registered by a subsidiary of an Italian company, where they filed a complaint saying that they have lost $18.6 million worth of funds. This company is headquartered in Italy. And how it began is the CEO received a mail from the group CEO, which was very similar looking email ID. Now, all of us have seen such attempts. Sometimes they are caught, sometimes they are not caught. In this case, it was not caught. The email address was very similar to the genuine address of the group CEO. And one important thing about internet is, though it is a big infrastructure now powering digital economies, India is talking about $1 trillion digital economy soon. It is actually a network which came about. It's basically a network of networks which came about through academic experimentation, and it is not designed for really enterprise kind of working because it has very open protocols, and that is the reason why it is successful. Uh, the uptake of internet was beyond anybody's imagination, and security was never baked into the design of how the protocols work, and that is why we see a lot of issues because how computers identify each other, how people identify themselves to the computers, all that is not very securely designed. So this particular, and on the internet, as I mentioned, anybody can spoof email of any person. So whichever email ID uh, uh, whichever ID is being used, it can be successfully spoofed, at least in one-way communication. So I may receive tomorrow mail from my email ID, which is advisory@sarvade.in, and uh, and if I'm not careful, I may act on it and then suffer a harm. So this particular case was exactly like that. The group CEO, so-called group CEO, wrote to the India head saying that we are going to discuss something confidential, so don't talk about this to anyone. And we are doing some acquisitions in China. And then they went into some discussions, lawyers were brought in, and so on and so forth. So a lot of discussion took place. And eventually the India head was told that money needs to be transferred, cash, for some deal which is going on. And the money was actually sent to these banks by the CEO. And it was sent in 3 tranches, 6 entities in Hong Kong and one in Taizu in China. And obviously it was withdrawn quickly. So when the case was filed and the investigation was started, it was found that obviously this whole impersonation attack, the style of the CEO was imitated, and there was a doubt that there is a compromise of the email box at the other end to enable the fraudsters to impersonate, as we call it, men in the middle. So this was the big case. I don't know finally what happened. Probably the money would, of course, never have come back. But this was reported in about 4 years ago. But this is not the only case. There was another case where there was actually a deepfake call in around that same time, 2019, which resulted into a $35 million transfer from a company in UAE. Of course, this slide is a little dated now, as we know. Deepfake technology, which is basically something which is generative AI can churn up with minimal inputs, is something which is happening all around us. And there have already been cases. There was a case a few months ago in Mumbai, a lady who works in a multinational corporation. Her son studies in US, and she got a call from her son from his number. And the son said, I am applying to this university. I have to pay the fees. Tomorrow is the deadline. Can you now do the transfer? The lady at the middle of the night groggily woke up and did the transfer the funds, initiated the transfer. And then after a couple of days, she was checking up, and then it was found that the whole thing was completely spoofed. The voice call, the telephone number from which the call had come. And I was talking to a person from telecom sector, and he said the protocols which were built initially in the telecom sector are still operating with low strength encryption, with no proper authentication of devices. That's why these spoofing calls are possible. So that's where we are. The infrastructure is very legacy, and the attacks are very current generation or next generation. Okay, so having seen this this particular case, let's go to the laundry list of what all attacks can happen. So typically, all fraudsters, most attackers are looking for making money out of the attack. There are other motivations also, but as probably as board members, we are more concerned about how to protect the company's financial assets, but also company may have intellectual property assets. There is strategic intelligence in the company about competition, about their business plans, which can be of interest to somebody else, and so on. The company may also be handling a lot of personal data, and today the bill has been introduced in Lok Sabha about data protection. I have a slide on that later. So what kind of risks are we talking about when we talk of cyber risks? We talk of data breach as a risk which many companies have faced because as they grow, they collect data of their customers, of their employees in large numbers. And if the data is not protected well, then it can get breached and can cause a lot of harm to the company's customers and the company's reputation and goodwill and so on. So that is one risk which is there. But there's also malware and ransomware. So famously, as you would have seen from regulatory filings done by a pharma company in India, the company was hit with ransomware, 17 countries, systems all locked down, major loss. Another pharma company in Hyderabad actually said their top line has been impacted because of ransomware attack. So ransomware actually is really, really very prevalent, and it also it kind of generates funds for the fraudsters through the untraceable channel of bitcoins and so on. And it is also a compliance issue for companies which are going to make the payments as to how they will account for the money and so on. So there is a ransomware, and then having to pay ransom to get your data back is there. But ransomware doesn't come only with data being encrypted and held away from you, but the same data can be copied and sold to your competitors. The same data can be used for attacking your customers and so on. So this is a big kind of a risk which we see. Phishing and social engineering, not a separate risk by itself, but I mean, it is there because phishing, which is basically a spoofed email or a spoofed message, or now spoofed WhatsApp calls, all those coming, and people posing something. I mean, some of the big frauds that are happening out there are people are getting calls to participate into some work from home product evaluation, etc. And then eventually, once the trust is established, They are asked to pay money, put some deposit for getting higher value assignments, and that's where they end up losing money. So phishing is actually by far the most common way in which employees of an organization or even the senior management is targeted. And this is a threat which needs to be taken seriously by itself. Insider threats are always of concern. Insider threats are of concern everywhere. I mean, there's no organization which is immune from insider threats. And insiders have actually higher privileges. They know actually your defenses very well. And insiders can be motivated by money. They can be motivated by somebody extorting them. You would be reading about this case which is going on, a DRDO scientist in Pune being honey trapped by somebody purportedly from UK, and then passing on very sensitive information. And then such a compromised insider can be a big risk to the organization. And these insiders can be very senior people. Older people have less salience to red flags because of the way things are structured, their understanding of technology trends, and so on. So this becomes a very, very important vector by which attackers can get in, and then they can take out a lot of valuable assets, or they can cause a lot of damage to the company. We also see denial of service attacks. So typically, a company now most of the companies have a lot of their assets on the internet. A lot of digital commerce is happening. If the company website goes down, if a bank website goes down, there is a lot of reputation loss, there is business loss, and so on. And these denial of service attacks can happen because on the internet, anybody can send a request to any web-facing server, and if the requests keep coming and the server is not designed for that capacity, the server can crash. So that is the denial of service attack. We'll touch upon it a bit later also. Cyber extortion, I already talked about how assets are can be kept under ransom, and then money can be taken out. There are third-party risks because today no company works by itself. There are always vendors, there are outsourcing partners, there are software developers who are doing work for enterprise. And if security is not well designed all in this entire ecosystem, it can come and harm the company which has done the outsourcing. Uh, Data corruption itself is a big risk. If the data is not properly stored, backups are not taken properly, backups are not tested well, and there is some disruption like a flood or some kind of a hardware failure, then data loss can happen, which can be really very significant. And we have heard such cases where there have been instances where critical customer records have been lost by organizations. Cyber espionage, intellectual property, again, whichever company is competing on the basis of their IP, pharma, AI, algorithms, government secrets, all of these can really be targeted by attackers who then won't be seen, but they will be, once they are entrenched, they will be passing out information and so on. So the issues in cyber risks are many, but I thought this is a list which probably will help us get a sense of what all we are going to deal with. Now, if you look at India itself, how we have kind of come up the curve, I think the Digital India initiative has been underway for now several years, and many schemes have been run under this. Wonderful extension of government services has happened. Financial services have become available to the masses. And all of this is reflected in the numbers which are there. I won't go through each of the bullets, but if you see financial expansion, the Jam Trinity working its magic and so on, the penetration of internet itself is very much there. Urban areas definitely, but also in rural areas. Mobile internet is by far the most prevalent way in which the internet is reaching people, and they're feeling empowered, and their productivity is going up and so on. I think India has the lowest by far the data costs over the world. So we have seen lot of advances here, and then there are new protocols coming out. ONDC is one. UPI is already a success story, and so on. And of course, social media is the place where everybody spends a lot of time. I think Facebook was the most prominent social platform, and but there are others which are also there. Uh, Okay, my presentation is a little. Okay, so I wanted to just quote the famous professor from Harvard, Nicholas Carr, who has written many books. But this is an old quote, of course. When I was doing my PhD, I read this article in 2004. And he talks very interesting about the benefits of technology after some time are taken for granted. They don't matter anymore for in a competitive scenario, but the risks which come with that resource, IT, become much more important. And I think this is something which is very central to cyber risk. The benefits may or may not be there, but the risks are very much there. So I thought we could look at some of the basic things, basic concepts, and see how we can use this to build our framework in dealing with cyber risk. So, as I mentioned earlier, computers have to know humans that there is an authorized user who is going to use that computer. And this is done in three ways by computers. So one is the password, which is the most common way it is done. Uh, Passwords or a PIN for a phone and so on. But second attribute is possession. And if you have your device with you, then that is your computer, and that is something which can receive an OTP because that device is in your possession. The bank will, in this scenario, if the bank is going to send an OTP, then it is relying on the fact that the device is in your possession and your password to log into your bank is there. But the second factor here is the possession, and which is what is being leveraged. And the third factor is inherence, which is the biometric part of who we are, our fingerprints, our retinas, our ear geometry. I mean, there are many ways in which biometrics operate. And so these multi-factor authentication is what is the now norm. Nobody is going to rely only on passwords. And this is important because in your companies where you are looking at things, if there is multi-factor authentication not implemented, this is the first thing to get done. But we also have to look at many times cyber risk is looked at only as a technology problem. It is actually like all other problems. It is comprising of people, process, and technology aspects. So this is something which comes up regularly. There's no system which can be only improved by adding technology elements to it. You have to look at the processes, and the people who are operating or using the system have to be familiar with the features and the safe ways of using that system. So this PPT is a very good framework to use for looking at any problem, and definitely cyber risk. We also have vulnerabilities and threats and incidents. So vulnerability is a gap in the system which can be exploited. So just to take a regular example, if I have a back door of my house and its bolt doesn't fit properly, that's a vulnerability. And if then somebody comes to know about this, then that becomes a threat. And if the person comes in through that door, then it becomes an incident. So this is in terms of taxonomy, these are some important things to know. Vulnerabilities are always the starting point for hardening any system. And typically now this is done through automated systems. Vulnerabilities get identified based on the technology stack which is in use. There are many elements to a technology stack, so operating system, applications, the network, and their vulnerabilities being detected have to be quickly acted upon. Patching has to be done. Patches are released with some lag. Till that time, some compensatory controls have to be put by organizations and so on. And this is something which is very useful to know how many vulnerabilities are there, how many are open, how many got closed, how many are aging, and so on. So this is something which is important in overseeing cybersecurity. But what all is at stake? So we looked at this denial of service attack on a bank website, for example. That is the availability aspect, that the site is not available for people to use it. So that is the availability aspect. But confidentiality, as I mentioned, the strategic plans, the IP of a company, they're all confidentiality aspect. And integrity is if something getting modified. Tomorrow, for example, a bank transfer is being done, and instead of going to A, it goes to B, there is an integrity issue. The fourth element which has now got added is safety. So we see now Internet of Things deployment happening, and autonomous cars are all around us. And if somebody can hack into that and cause an incident that involves other aspects, but definitely safety of those who are around that particular object. So this is something important to know. The framework for dealing with cyber risk and any other risk, of course, is that that of prevent, detect, respond. I mean, just to take the COVID example, uh, we saw vaccination as the way to prevent, or wearing of masks, or social distancing, or quarantining. So, but detection was also there, doing tests quickly, nasal swabs and what you have, and quickly responding, to more serious cases. That's the way it works. This framework is actually expanded, which I will cover a bit later. But this is the basic framework: prevent, detect, respond, and this works in all kinds of risks, fraud risks, cyber risks, health risks, and so on. And that's what we need to keep in mind. Since the topic is of cyber risk and not cyber security per se, uh, uh, there are a couple of concepts here which are important. So there is a famous saying that in security that first saying is that all uh, technology problems can be solved by management, but no management problem can be solved by technology. So that is one. And the second is, if your cost of uh, adding a control and enforcing it is more than the benefit it's going to give, then the control is not required. So basically, we have to understand what is the damage potential of a phenomenon and is it relevant to you, and then take measures. So risk assessment is the starting point for understanding what is the risk, how severe it is, depending on the business profile of the organization, the kind of controls which are there, the incidents which have already been noted, and so on. And once the risk is assessed, then there is I will cover this in a bit more detail later, because risk management is now become very specialized, cyber risk management, and there is a whole new discipline of cyber risk management which has come, which we can look at. Okay, so the special part of cyber risk is that it's an adversarial risk. So it is not like any other natural calamity kind of risk, which may happen, may not happen, and we know how frequently things happen, and we can deal with that. This is a risk where there are adversaries on the other side, and they are adapting, and they are figuring out what you're doing, and they are escalating their capabilities, and so on. So this adversarial aspect of cyber risk is very important. And cyber attackers are also operating in a very evolved marketplace. Uh, there are people who write malware, there are people who distribute malware, there are people who send emails, there are people who look at accounts, mule accounts, there are people who are going to provide support to all these people, and so on. So this is a very developed, it's like a business enterprise running underground, and there are 24/7 support desks available to them, and the attackers are really well supported by their own kith and kin. Also, attacks have become automated. They are also very cheap to launch. And this is something which then now we've seen there's nobody who is small enough not to be targeted. Everybody is getting targeted, whether it is an individual person with very limited means or the largest corporation, everybody is under attack. The technology itself allows scaling up and automation of the attacks. And there are challenges of arresting people. They are mostly in other jurisdictions. Even in India, there are multiple hubs which don't operate in the same state. They are all always operating outside the state, and becomes very difficult for the law enforcement to travel and then do any kind of enforcement actions. So these are something which is important to know. Now, having seen the problems, I think we should now look at the solutions. So this framework, which is most popular and my personal favorite, is the NIST cybersecurity framework. NIST is the National Institute of Science and Technology in US, and they do a lot of basic fundamental research on cybersecurity and other areas. And this is an old one now. It is in version 2. Version 2.0 has just been put out for consultation. But primarily it talks about taking the 5-pillar approach. I talked about protect, detect, respond, but it also now looks at identify what assets do you have, what is your business environment, how is your governance structured, what risks you have, and then what is your risk management strategy, what is your risk appetite, And then starting from there and goes into actually putting controls, then detecting events and incidents as they're happening quickly, responding in a very well rehearsed manner, and then basically coming back to the business as usual scenario as quickly as possible. This framework is very, very useful. SEBI has recently put out a cybersecurity framework draft entirely based on this particular framework for all its regulated entities. So it'll be useful if you were to spend some time on this to understand the overall approach and how it can be used by the organization that you are in. So this the in terms of the overall architecture, as we know, the three lines of defense model is very popular, and this again is a great governance tool to use. The first line defense always people at the in the front office management controls are there to make them do the right things, because security is everybody's job. It's not that one department is going to take care of it. Everybody has to be aware, alert, and do their bit in thwarting the threats. And the second line contains people who are more specialized. So if from a financial accounting perspective, there is the financial control people under the CFO. Security includes physical security, uh, executive security, and cyber security now. So these are all very specialized areas, and it is important to have people who understand that particular specialization, and they are in charge of running programs or raising awareness, uh, running some security solutions also, and then ensuring that the enterprise is protected. And obviously, the internal audit has a job of ensuring that things are running as they are supposed to run, and look at exceptions and do some kind of penetration testing also to ensure that the assurance is based on real data and not just qualitative feeling that everything is fine. And obviously, it rolls up into the senior management and the board and the audit committee. But there are also external elements like the external auditors who can provide an independent view on things, and then the regulators also are there in some of the fields. I think let's see this short video. So the short message is you have to continuously monitor risks. They can change overnight, and then you can get hurt. So now coming to the exact way how risks will be measured, there's a very well accepted standard called FAIR methodology. Uh, uh, so it talks about identifying risk scenarios. This is something which is you would have seen risk registers and in the enterprise risk management framework also. What assets are at risk, and what are the various threats which are there, and then look at evaluating the loss event frequency. So maybe the risk is there, but it's not as frequent. As we know, losses due to flooding are only there in some times of the year and not through the year and so on. So that loss event frequency also becomes important. And here we can rely on the data which is available. Unfortunately, in cyber risk, data about events of various kinds is not very readily available. Now that there is a requirement from the computer emergency response team in India to report all incidents to them, probably that is going to be one-stop shop where all risk events can be cataloged, categorized, and then the data can be made available to those who want to use that in decision making. But loss event frequency from private vendors also is available. But this is something which is important to keep in mind. And then obviously the loss magnitude. What is the if events were to happen, how much is the exposure in terms of dollar value, as they call it, or rupee value here? And so there are also primary and secondary loss events which can go into the way. For example, if there is a data breach, a lot of the costs can be, of course, loss of business, but there will also be remediation costs. There will be litigation. There will be regulatory fines. There is a PR kind of expenditure required, and so on. So the loss magnitude has to be calculated based on various elements, and then the actual risk value can be articulated. So this is a framework in public domain. So there are some details there which I will not go into. I think we'll need some time to have a Q&A as well. But this is the decision tree is basically about what are the different elements which are going to be there. And the concept of resistance strength is also very interesting. I mean, the vulnerability may be there, but the organization may have resilience to really deal with an incident happening because of the inherent nature of the people it has, the system it has, the experience it has, and so on. So some of these are also relevant factors, and there are other things like data points around response cost, as I mentioned, replacement costs for any assets which have been which need to be replaced. There are increasingly regulators are also becoming very active, not as active as probably in other geographies where the fines can be really very onerous, but increasing the amounts have been increasing. The current data protection law which is coming in actually has the ceiling of 250 crore as the limit for a fine for not protecting customer data well. So we can now look at very exemplary and large fines also. But this is the way the whole framework operates, and it's very useful to use it. There are now automated systems available to collect data and prepare dashboards and make the job of the risk assessors and also the decision makers that much easier. The whole discipline of cyber risk quantification is an emerging discipline which is very useful in putting value and then taking decisions. As the famous saying is, half the marketing expenditure is wasted, but you don't know which half. So in security also, you are going to spend a lot of money, but you don't know what part of that expenditure is really productive and which is not. So that is something which the new technique can be used in. So today the bill has been introduced, as I mentioned. It has very important to understand concepts like data principal, data fiduciary, data processor, and data protection officer. There is a board which is being set up. Basically, at the high level kind of understanding, data principal is the person whose data is being processed. The obligations for data fiduciary, which is going to be the enterprise which is going to use that person's data, is that data processing now can be done only with consent. Earlier, data was collected, a lot of data was collected, some of it was used, some of it was not used, and so on. But now the law says it has to be collected with consent. And those businesses which have already been working on such data, they have to notify the user about such data being with them, and then continue to process that data. But this is going to be a very big change for all enterprises because everybody has customers' data, and the data, if now is traced, data breach is traced to an enterprise, there can be very serious consequences. So the consent also has to be free, specific. It cannot be collected as a general consent saying that next 5 years, whatever you give us, we can use. No, every time a different data set is being collected, consent has to be obtained and the consent artifact has to be stored properly. It has to be informed. So as you would have seen, whenever you get an update from Apple, there's a terms and conditions which you accept. I mean, all of us accept because we have to do the work. but they also send us by email. They can send us by email and so on. So those kind of things, facilities have to be offered. The consent has also to be, the notice has to be given in the local language. All Indian languages which have been notified are have to be complied with by the enterprises. So there's a lot of translation work which is going to come in. The principal can withdraw consent. So as a user, if you don't find something comfortable, in which case the processing must cease and the data has to be erased. So there is a also category of entities called consent managers, which is being introduced, because obviously all this compliance can be done by specialized entities. And this is something which will evolve over a period of time. I'm sure there will be some hand-holding time which will be given by the government, probably 18 months or 1 year. I don't know. There was some discussion earlier about this. But considering that the law is already delayed, a lot of discussion has already happened. Many enterprises are, of course, dealing with GDPR, which is the European framework on this subject anyway. I feel that the time given will be short, and then enterprise will be checked if there are incidents and if there are grievances, whether they are doing a good job or not. So this is something which is important, and as I said, a lot of fines are being proposed. We also have seen in regulated sectors a lot of work which has been done on by sectoral regulators. So RBI, since I had the occasion to work with RBI, I wanted to cover a bit about the banking sector. So RBI's the major policy guidelines came in 2016, to 2nd June, and they talked about board-approved cybersecurity policy, risk assessments. We talked about risk assessment earlier, incident response, employee awareness and training, appointment of specialized people like CISOs, and they're reporting to chief risk officer or a board member, executive director. So these are some hard-coded directions which banks have been asked to follow. Security Operations Center to detect any incidents happening, to properly track how things are going on, etc. Assessments on security postures and so on, and then reporting of cybersecurity incidents. So this has been a whole framework which has been rolled out. Interestingly, RBI also got all bank board members trained over a 2-day program in IDRBT in Hyderabad, and with an assessment in the end. And similar programs are being run for CXOs and the IT security staff. So a lot of training, capacity building has happened in the banking sector. Likewise, SEBI has also been issuing guidelines for its regulated entities. There is a cybersecurity framework also out for consultations. The national level cybersecurity regulator is actually CERT in Computer Emergency Response Team for the purpose of reporting of incidents. And they have issued guidelines last year on cyber incidents to be reported within 6 hours. So this is something which is binding on all enterprises. And if an enterprise is not following it, they are exposed to compliance or regulatory risk. So with all this discussion, I thought this mind map kind of captures the board's role in terms of what all they should be doing. And it looks at governance and oversight as the starting point, approval of policies, establishing reporting structures, understanding risks and prioritizing the higher impact risks and so on. Then looking at strategy, risk appetite, tolerance, ensuring that the money spent is on high priority items and so on. Also build good teams, ensure that third party risk management is done, and compliance reporting happens on time, awareness training is happening all the time, resource allocation is cost effective, the return on investment is at an acceptable level, and so on. So this is a whole gamut of, this is not something rocket science, because I always believe that as Drucker said, strategy you will get anywhere. I mean, these are all very basic frameworks and understanding. How it gets executed in an enterprise with the constraints of people, resources, other priorities, that is the challenge. And that's where I think the board's role comes in. And I think that's where good understanding of cyber risks is important. And I think all board members have to gear up for understanding the risk and ensuring that the enterprise are ready to face that risk. As we know, a car with good brakes can really go very fast. Risk management is like that. It's investment into a good seat belt and a good brake, and that everybody has to kind of keep in mind. So thank you for your attention. I will now stop my presentation, and probably we should have some Q&A.
Thank you, sir, for a very comprehensive orientation on uh, from all possible angles the risk could evolve and how to comprehend and deal with it, and specifically drawing our attention what is needed from the board and the directors to work on, either in terms of having best in class systems in place, and of course capacity building and orientation is very very important. Now with your permission, I would like to take questions, and I could see the chat box. There are 2 3 questions, but I would appreciate if we can have one-to-one interaction with your permission. So can I have a raised hand so that we can take up the questions one by one? Okay. I can see Mr. Alok Mukherjee has a question. Ashish, can you help us um,
Yes, sir.
having Alok on mic so that he can ask a question? Uh, Alok, please unmute yourself. Hello.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Saravade, for a very quick but very succinct points on cybersecurity. I think it will be useful to all of us. I have just 2 short questions, which I'll make it even very, very brief. One is in these days of more and more board meetings are being held online, as you know very well, and even AGMs are held in line with the help of NSDL in most cases. And this is going on for everything, even from a large corporate body where we are there to a club in Calcutta, everything is now online. Does it seem to you that we are increasing the risks, particularly cyber risk, by doing this, as a lot of confidential matters are naturally discussed in the board meetings? My second point is that we all have different kinds of auditor in the company: statutory auditor, internal auditor, cost auditor, and so on and so forth. And the internal auditor is, of course, very important. Although a company might have its own internal audit department, most of the time large companies have their internal audit done by external people. Now, how far this has advanced in our country, where we can give this risk management, including cyber risk management, not just cyber risk, but including cyber risk management, to the internal auditor, who can help the company in making the compliance even more strict, so that the company is saved from attacks.
Right. So I will take the first question about the confidentiality of video calls and the sensitive information being exchanged. This is a very important point, and there was a time when nobody had heard of this company called Zoom, and it became then a unicorn very quickly because they understood the video conferencing requirements of the COVID era, and they could really scale up, and they were very agile in introducing features which everybody loved. So, and there were a lot of security issues. People could suddenly, with a link or a meeting number, could charge in and then participate or whatever. So all those teething troubles have been sorted out. How the video conferencing solutions are implemented is itself a specialized area. What risks are there? Uh, Screen recording, screenshots to be taken. All those things which are standard in data leak prevention kind of a project are very much looked at by the cybersecurity teams, and the risk is very much there. So there is a concept called analog hole in cybersecurity, which means that whatever your digital controls are there, they won't work if somebody is putting a camera here and recording the screen. That then overcomes all your controls. So the strategy for cyber risk is always defense in depth. Defense in depth. So obviously, you need to know what can be shared, what cannot be shared, who are the people who have access to what data information classification. All these become very important. Without that, merely having some technology controls doesn't work. So it is a complex problem, obviously, but video conferencing as a way to do remote work is now pretty much mainstream, and some of the earlier risks have been addressed. Obviously, if an employee is bent upon uh, kind of taking out information and using now every photograph can also be OCR'd in no time, as we know. The software itself has that feature. So there are a lot of DLP related issues, but I presume those can be overcome by having a proper framework about information classification and how the information is guarded. Coming to the second point that you mentioned about internal audit having capability, it's a very important point because cyber risk, cyber security audits is a specialized area. It requires very specialized people. And when I was building the Rebit team for RBI, we realized that the number of specializations are so many. Application security auditor, server auditor, web specialist, uh, penetration testing, red teaming, blue teaming, purple teaming. There are a lot of specializations, and obviously, not every organization can have such resources in house. It is preferred to have resources in house because then they understand the systems well, and if they are doing a good job, then the value generation is very high. But some of the services can be outsourced. But there is no getting away from the fact that internal audit must have now information security auditing capabilities, and this is becoming a very well known and well paying specialization also. So a lot of if you see the multinational company and their global excellence centers, most of them will have one center on internal audit information security team. So that is very much there. So it is something which money has to be invested and capabilities have to be built, and that is something in the long run much required.
Okay, thank you, sir. I can see JP Dash having a question. Mr. Das, can you quickly ask? And I would request if we
Yeah.
can be very brief and straight in our questions so that we can accommodate maximum.
Right, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Sir, actually, I'm the government. So I'm little, we are trying to get the mighty approved cloud in the GCC cloud. Instead, of course, it's a mighty approved CSPs they are offering. But what are they fully secure, or what additional steps we can take to make our cloud environment in GCC model more secure? That's my first question.
So if I understand the question correctly, are you talking about as a service provider or as a consumer of the service?
No, sir, as a consumer. As a consumer.
Sorry?
As a consumer.
As a consumer, right?
Right, sir.
Right. So cloud security actually is again I didn't touch upon it because it kind of sometimes looks overwhelming. But governance of cloud security is a new area because cloud offers many advantages. And some of the headaches which especially a small and medium-sized company will face in running their own data center are completely removed. But new risks come in, and if you see the list of incidents of cloud related events, they're mostly about misconfiguration. So people didn't know how to secure a bucket, as they call it, on the cloud, and that resulted into data exposure. Obviously, these are sometimes teething trouble. So as more people get aware, more people get trained, more controls get put, better monitoring happens, these will kind of go away. But cloud security is definitely a new area, and it needs to be, the CISOs themselves are kind of learning about it. The resources on cloud security are very scarce in the market. But I think following the basic approach of design, proper review, third-party assessment of how the configuration, the whole process are running, I think a lot of the risk can be mitigated.
Thank you, sir.
Great. I can see Riju Chatterjee has a question. Riju, can you unmute yourself? for a quick question.
Yes, thanks, Dr. Neeraj. Thanks, sir, for an excellent session. Quick question. I just wanted to clarify, and I may have missed, which is the governing body on cyber risk from an India corporate perspective? Is it the RBI or SEBI? And where can we find the guidelines on cyber risk to take to our organizations and get them implemented? Thank you, sir.
So the work so far has been done, as I said, by the sectoral regulators. So financial sector was the primary one because of the loss potential involved. So those regulators' guidance is very much primary and very relevant. Other sectors are yet kind of gearing up their role. Some of these are actually voluntary initiatives, like the power sector, transportation. Many computer emergency response teams have been set up, because it begins with awareness, knowledge sharing, and gradually moving up. But as we see, there is a government has set up a National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center, which has a list of industries which are considered as critical infrastructure. So power, energy, government, healthcare, some of these national level institutions will also fall in that, and it is up to the center to look at systems which are critical from that point of view and get them declared as protected systems and put them under better oversight, as well as higher penalty if somebody is going to probe those systems. So, so it will remain, I think, a risk-led approach. Probably sectors which are not so reliant on information technology may see regulation later. Obviously, the certain notification applies to all. So expectation is that whoever is handling, who is running a computer system and has users and has data in it, will abide by that. But with this data protection law coming in, anybody who is now going to deal with customer data will have to deal with it. So I think the mechanism is based currently as designed on a grievance or a reactive kind of approach from the board. But increasingly, as events happen, probably companies will have to proactively put in place better policies and teams and so on, and not be caught unawares if there is a major incident and then they're fined in a heavy manner by the regulator.
Okay, thank you, sir. Mr. Sabrishan CK, would you like to have a quick question?
Yeah, thank you, Nandkumar ji, for an insightful presentation. I have two questions. One is with the generative AI becoming more and more prominent, how does one guard against the risk posed? In fact, I even saw a video of purportedly of Bill Gates, which throws up a lot of nonsense, and nobody could believe it's a fake video. It's a deep fake video. Secondly, the databases security, can it be improved by embracing blockchain technology?
Right. So generative AI is definitely something which has caught everybody unawares, because the speed with which it came about and burst on the scene and saw adoption. I mean, the number of people using generative AI, GPT kind of technologies is very, very high. Now, some of that is going to be used for creating deepfakes, as we saw earlier. In fact, there was a video, again, we see a lot of this stuff on social media and via the WhatsApp University. But a 3-second audio clip is sufficient for creating a very plausible deepfake audio file after that. So it is that kind of seed which is required. So it is very difficult to deal with it. Obviously, risks for different organizations are going to be different. The CEO fraud, which I mentioned, is very possible, because now, I mean, 2 days ago, there was a case in Kerala where actually audio deepfake was created, and actually a video deepfake was also tried. And the person says it was a little grainy, but I could believe that my colleague, both was retired from Coal India 10 years ago, and he was in distress, and I had sent money to him. So these kind of individual level attacks are going to happen. They're the easiest to launch and very difficult to mitigate. But at the enterprise level, the organizational culture of following the right process, not being personality driven, having right controls to detect and maker, checker, and approver kind of workflows, those will be very useful to have, and probably that's what we'll have to rely on. The second point, sorry, I missed the second point. Can you? Blockchain. Sorry, I remember now. So I'm a very skeptical person when it comes to blockchain. Blockchain came about a few years ago and was basically the best use case has always been the only use case that is Bitcoin. And it is actually, if you look at from a resource point of view, it is highly wasteful. Bitcoin, of course, wastes resources which are actually dangerous to the planet because of the way mining happens. But even maintaining multiple records in a distributed ledger format is itself redundant, and unless there is a high degree of distrust, it is not really required. I mean, none of us doubt that the central bank is not keeping a proper account of its financial assets and for the country and so on. So some trust in the society is inherent, and only in cross-border scenarios some blockchain-related applications can be there. But I have not seen those also really at a scale level. So that's my very brutal and frank view on blockchain.
Thank you, sir. Baswar Mukherjee, can you please come in quickly?
Yeah, I have a very quick question. Thank you for your session, Mr. Nandkumar. My question is that when we are doing a transaction where there are different entities involved. So, for example, if I'm being exhorted to do digital payments and I'm having to deal with both the platform, like a Google Pay or whatever it is, as well as the bank, but both are regulated by different either authorities or they're not under the same structure. In case of a problem, how do I resolve? So, for example, Google Pay is very loosely governed by the Payment Council of India, but more other than that, not. Whereas banks are under the payment and settlement systems, which is a different construct. And I can extrapolate this logic for whenever we are using third-party applications, providers, etc., who are governed by a different kind of set of rules.
So big tech regulation is a new area, again, emerging regulatory challenge, so to say. But I think in the financial sector, the regulated entities are banks primarily, and then the payment system operators. So the relevant acts give the authority to the regulators, both of which happen to be within RBI, to regulate them and obviously look at any issues. Customer grievance is very much a part of the overall framework. So I don't see any major challenge in filing a complaint and getting the issues resolved. NPCI also operates a customer grievance process and interface. So how effective these are will probably need some analysis and some metrics, but these mechanisms definitely exist.
Okay, I'm disconnected.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Arasu, Thendral Arasu, can you please?
Yeah, very good afternoon to everyone. I have two questions only, just I will make it very fast. Computer and hardware and software, it is mainly based on the program written by the human. So is there any threat that OE itself making any data leak? That is my question number one. Question number two is there any international cyber crime police and court are available? How effective it is for national and international? This is what my thanks.
So I don't think I understood the first question very well, but hardware and software vulnerabilities are always going to be there. There is no getting away from that. Hardware is manufactured actually in multiple countries, and it is very difficult to also test the hardware for its full security assurance. That's why this supply chain security is again another specialized area, and especially in network switching equipment, etc., it becomes nationally critical to have capabilities to test them and ensure that the right kind of equipment is being used. Software, of course, is lines of code, which can be a few million lines of code. And by nature, 10,000, 1,000 lines of code will have about 7 to 15 errors in it. So that is the kind of potential for things to go wrong, bugs and all. So, so we have to deal with vulnerabilities coming up, and they have to be mitigated in different ways. The international police is actually a misnomer because there's no international police as such. Interpol is basically a coordinating mechanism which will pass requests from one country to another, and that's it. Police anyway is not the right agency because they come very late in the game, by which time damage has happened. Many times the perpetrators are not available in the country. So most of police investigations you will see are highly frustrating for the police officers because they are neither able to retrieve money, they do only paperwork, which goes and sits in the court. Courts also don't want to take up those technical cases. So it's not a very happy scenario there. But in any case, the prevention is the best way to deal with this. So we have to work on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is Mr. Vikas.
Yeah, thank you, sir, for the very informative session. My question is, recently we have seen, generative AI, you know, there is a lot of, apprehensions regarding generative AI that, it can manipulate video messages, audio messages, morph messages, and it can pose a big cyber security threat also, right? And many governments are thinking like, okay, how to regulate this kind of AI, just to prevent, cyber kind of attacks. Sir, I just wanted to know, your understanding on this. Is there being something being discussions happening in our country in India, because many Western governments have started talking about this topic. So if you can just shed some light from your end, that would be helpful for us. Thank you.
So generative AI, as we discussed earlier, helps launch better phishing attacks. So that is the risk which very much there. Of course, a lot of this work is being done in US and places where there is a lot of big money. As you might know, OpenAI got 10 billion investment from Microsoft, and that's how they could really come out with 3.5 so quickly. So the regulatory discussion is actually academic for us because we will only see deployments here, and obviously our citizens will end up using that and also be open to attacks which are based on generative AI. But I mean, if you see, there are good initiatives run by OECD on understanding AI, its potential, its risks, and how to use them. There's actually a center in Canada which is about raising awareness about AI, which is just single mission statement. We have seen one paper from Niti Aayog sometime back about uses of AI, and I presume some work will be happening in how to apply AI to our problems. I mean, we see I recently saw a very interesting video of some Israeli farm where a robot which is driven by AI is actually going to each apple on a tree and checking whether the apple is ripe for picking or not, and then taking the decision based on that logic, etc. I think there are wonderful applications. I mean, just imagine every child getting a personal tutor who understands and can teach and realize its child's full potential. So I think there are wonderful potential things, but the risks of AI going out of hand and becoming artificial general intelligence is very much there. That's a whole different discussion altogether. But Jeffrey Hinton, who is considered the godfather of AI, his interviews are there on YouTube, and they are really scary. So there are multiple dimensions to it. But I think we should focus on applications and see how we can use those best.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next, can we have Ajay Ji for the question? I can see some questions from him in the chat box. Ajay, would you like to ask straight?
Yeah, actually, I'm in office, so that's the reason I type my question. I can't speak loudly.
Okay. So, sir, there is a question from his side about he wants to know about the trends and emerging technologies that are likely to influence the nature of cyber risks, and how can the board prepare to address them?
So I think one important technology which we have not discussed much, because obviously it's very specific to the sector, is Internet of Things. And we are seeing many applications of this. The problem with Internet of Things is multifold. One is many of these devices are manufactured on in very large numbers with certain assumptions and certain very basic rudimentary security controls. And they are very difficult to patch also. Once they are deployed, it's very difficult to upgrade them if some vulnerabilities are found. Now, what this does is it also results into leakage of data. So there was this famous case of CCTVs which are on network being hacked and being visible to other people. And we see this in movies regularly, right? The hackers take control of the city's CCTV and are watching everything. But this is a true scenario. This is a plausible scenario because the IoT price points, vendors, manufacturing places, deployments, it's a very not a very security friendly scenario, I would say. So that is number one. Number two is many of these devices have large bandwidth. For example, a CCTV necessarily requires large bandwidth. And many of these devices can be hijacked to launch denial of service attacks on servers which are basically meant for very lightweight kind of a traffic. The other risks of how they can be hacked can be very specific. There was famous proof of concept demonstration of how an insulin pump could be remotely hacked and wrong quantities of medicines could be introduced into the blood of the person who was using it. So there are pacemakers being hacked. There are a lot of scenarios which are very specific to that technology. So that is something which requires only domain people to work with security people to understand the risk and then take put mitigating controls there. Apart from that, of course, this we talked about AI and AGI also. Other technologies, I think one technology which is commonly spoken of is quantum computing. And quantum computing, though it is still not demonstrated to work at a certain scale, I would say, has the potential to break all our encryption, and whatever we consider currently secure will be rendered insecure because quantum computing can break the encryption. Encryption is basically the way we protect things by scrambling them and ensuring that those only who have the right keys can unscramble them. But quantum computing can unscramble these without much problem because they can compute at that level of capability. Now, there is a attack called intercept and store, which for, say, for example, military communications or government communications, which can be currently encrypted, but 2 years down the line, they can be de-encrypted and some of the data can be misused. So there are many such technologies, and the applications are only limited by imagination, the wrong applications. So I would say we have to keep watching things.
Thank you, sir. Chetan Mangrolia, would you like to comment? I believe this is going to be the last question.
Yes, thanks, Neeraj. So, sir, greeting, and I would like to express my utmost appreciation for your highly informative session, and it was truly remarkable, sir. So, sir, quick question is regarding the general data protection regulation, which is largely, implementation in the European country. But how about in India? Indian government is serious about this?
The fact that the bill has been introduced today is definitely an indicator that government is serious about it, and it is largely somewhat similar. I would not say largely anymore, similar to the GDPR approach. I think the exceptions are more on the government side, which anyway is a separate area. But for corporates, the compliances are going to be similar to GDPR compliances. So I think we'll see over a period of time maturing of the ecosystem, better protection for more data. Obviously, financial data is what everybody is worried about, but health data, which can be very difficult to remediate once compromised, that will become more easily available now with wearables and more digitized health systems and so on. So this law is coming in at the right time. It would have been good to have this law 5 years ago, but better late than never. And we'll see, I think, definitely maturing of the ecosystem.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, with your kind permission, just one more I would like to accommodate. Mr. Anune, would you like to comment quickly? Please unmute yourself. Please unmute yourself, sir. Ashish, can you help him? Sir, please unmute yourself.
I have requested.
I think he's not. Mr. Subramanian Vaidya. And this is going to be the last. Mr. Subramanian Vaidya, would you like to quickly comment? Unmute yourself, sir, please. We have given you the rights.
Saravade sir,
Please.
it was a wonderful presentation and well answered questions and all that. But you know, I am in the pharmaceutical industry as a chairman of one of the big companies, and normally we expect certain things to be brought into the picture in the board meeting by internal auditors. Now, how far the internal auditors are confined to this information in that scale by which they can really audit these areas, or any dummy scopes possible for them to evolve a certain system by which people can be made aware of these things, particularly the plant heads and other financial heads and all that.
Right. No, I think internal audit will probably have to, as I mentioned earlier also, to develop the abilities to provide the independent assurance and have the right people to do that. But the main work remains in the second line of defense, where the Chief Information Security Officer has to have the right resources and the team to put right, do the risk assessment, obviously, put right controls, and then be accountable for the outcome of the investments being made and the operations to be, on the expected lines. I would think both, I mean, obviously the culture, awareness, first line doing its job, second line providing the specialization, and the third one, then internal audit becomes, I mean, a company will have probably limited resources. So many times, if you're not a regulated sector where the regulator wants only employees to be the internal auditors, then you can actually outsource the internal audit part and get that assurance. Ultimately, if you trust the auditor, internal or external, you can rely on the findings that they have. And good auditors know how to do the right sampling, do maybe more proactive exercises to do penetration testing also. Many internal audit teams can do very good red teaming, and they also engage some vendors also sometimes. It is done under their supervision, but they can really test the controls in a very aware manner, because they know what is the configuration and what are the possible ways in which the configuration can be defeated. So I would think probably that kind of approach might be helpful.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. So I believe there is a time when we need to close. There are many more questions I see in the chat box as well as raised hands. So thank you so much, sir, for sparing your valuable time and very interesting insights. I can see in the chat box the talk and the content has really been appreciated. It had been of great value to us as a member of the board and also as an individual, where we need to take all necessary steps in protecting ourselves. Data is the biggest assets which are being stolen away here and there by one or the other mean, by using by one or another technology. And every time such technologies are being put to bad use also by the people who have some wrong intents in the mind. So thank you once again, and thank you all of you. I'm very happy to share we had been having participation of 400 plus directors in this series. We'll soon come up in the last week of this month with another talk by another distinguished speaker. Have a great evening to all of you, and a special thanks on your behalf to Dr. Saravade.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so
very much. It was a great pleasure to be here. Bye.
Thank you, sir.